New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and you are on the Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network. Welcome. Welcome. Every week we have the opportunity to revisit what does it mean to be inclusive in our spiritual communities? What does it mean to become a spiritual community where oneness does not require sameness? What does it mean to be a stained glass spirit leader in our spiritual communities? We get to dive into all of that. Some weeks I have a featured guest and we talk about what they have done or the lessons they have learned. And other weeks I make it a toolkit week. And today is a toolkit week. So let me know if you have questions about what it means or what it takes to be inclusive in spiritual communities. If you have an example of something that happened to you or something you observed and you're curious, or you have an opinion about how that represents or does not represent inclusion, put either of those things in the chat. As you say hello, let me know that you're with us. Got Anita today and Shay. So glad to be with both of you, and a few other people who I can see are lurking in the background. And it's okay if you don't want to say hello and drop in any comments. I'm happy to share with you and happy that you are with us in any case. So today is a toolkit day, and that means that the show will be 30-ish minutes once I start talking after this introduction. And it's an open topics day. And the reason it's an open topics day is I literally have a topic planned, but a few days ago over the weekend, someone asked me a question and we got into a conversation, and they said to me, Tracy, that's something you should talk about on your podcast, on your show. I was like, really? Okay. And because it's a relatively timely topic in terms of when we're airing this, I'm going to switch it up and make it an open topics day. So I've got 2 or 3 things in mind that people have either said to me or asked me recently, like, within the last month or two. But also we can dive into anything you have. So again, if you have a question about inclusion, or if you have an opinion about inclusion in our spiritual communities that you would like me to respond to, feel free. So let's dive into the first example, because in 30 minutes or so, hopefully I can hit at least 4 different examples. So as many people know, at the recent Democratic National Convention, the candidates were, the official candidates representing the Democratic Party were named Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. And the person who was talking to me was talking about how the son of Tim Walz, Gus, was very emotionally excited and demonstrable, and how there were people who thought that was inappropriate and who criticized Gus, and in some level were criticizing the parents. Either they shouldn't have brought him, or they should have trained him up better not to show all that emotion as a male teenager. And we weren't talking about the politics of it. What we started talking about was, how does that happen in our spiritual communities? When someone is differently abled, or when people have different cultural backgrounds and they make assumptions, or they judge and criticize others. And it came up partially because in the general media, what was being described and shared by the end of that week of the convention was that there were a number of people who had attacked, or who had criticized, or who had made fun of Gus Walz. And then they wanted to take it all back when they found out that he had what some people would say a developmental disability, or he's just differently abled. And that, oh, if we had known his diagnosis, we wouldn't have said those things. Like, oh, if we had known that was going on with him, we wouldn't have said that. And the reality of, I had a reaction on many levels. One, from an inclusive point of view, why do we expect people to react a certain way and then judge it? And there were a lot of people saying, this is love being expressed. He's so proud of his dad. What's wrong with that? And I was just really struck by growing up as a Black woman, as a Black child, a Black teenager, a Black woman, how many times I've heard people say, oh, I can't tell that joke because someone who is in the group that the joke targets, is in the room, so I can't tell it, right? If there are women in the room, men will, there have been men who have said, oh, well, we have a woman, so we can't tell that because, right, it would be making fun of them, and that's not right. Or we had someone who, reports to me that, yeah, they made these comments about Black people that they never would have made if you had been in the room. So that's what's broken, right? If it's something I know that I would not say if someone from that group is in the room, then that probably means I shouldn't say it at all, because I know it's mean or hurtful or untrue or a stereotype that doesn't apply to everyone. And so if I know that, there's really no situation where it's okay. And in our spiritual communities, it's like, oh, we have a lesson to learn from that. Like, oh, I wouldn't make that comment if we had someone in our congregation who fit that group, or who was a member of that identity group. Oh, well, I wouldn't make that comment at our ministry team, at our team meeting. Like, I can make that comment about this person because they're not here. So this is a perfect time to have that reminder that if we know it's mean, if we are saying it's funny, but we know it's really a dig or a negative connotation, let's work on cleaning up our language and our mind so that we just clear all of that stuff out. Then when we say or do things that are hurtful, then it's coming from unconscious bias, and people can give us feedback without feeling like, oh, they knew what they were saying when they said it, right? And it takes that away. So that was the example over the weekend or a few days ago. The conversation was about that and how often we as spiritually grounded people allow the humanness and the low standards that have been set on the human level to usurp our higher being, our higher consciousness. One example. And again, if you have other examples, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll talk about them, or questions about things that have come up. Another example that came up recently was, so that was about disability or differing abilities or the perception of disability. This example also has come up in the last couple of months, and it's related to race and the stories that we tell about ourselves and others, and lacking any other explanation that makes sense to us. Then we look for, well, it must be about this way that we're different from one another. That's really obvious. And that happened recently to me with two different people related to race and ethnicity, where there were assumptions made because looking at one person's behavior and saying, this is what it would mean if I did that. And then, so that's wrong. And it must be because their race is different, or they're a different race than I am. And in the Stained Glass Spirit book, I don't know, maybe I can find it really quickly because I refer to it a lot. There is a chapter in the book in the section, Diversity is a Divine Idea. The second chapter is The Stories We Tell. And the line that I quote a lot after sharing a story is this: diversity is not the problem. It is the stories that we tell about diversity that are the problem. So when someone lacking any explanation for what they are experiencing, and it's not delivering, the experience with you is not delivering what you desired, be careful about your assumptions or telling the story to yourself or others that it must be because that person is different from me. And in this case, it was about race, that race was used as the reason that this person must not like me, or this person must want to avoid me, or this person isn't comfortable around me. And in our spiritual communities, that's really dangerous, not only because our human self does judge. It's part of what the brain does physiologically. But if we hold ourselves apart from members of our spiritual community and we avoid them, or we're telling other people about them and blaming race as the cause of the division or the discomfort, when really it could be something, it could be dozens of other things, right? It could be personality, it could be past exposure, it could be miscommunication, it could be communication style that may be influenced culturally by race, but it's the style. I know this has happened to me a number, like dozens, if not hundreds of times, that especially if I'm working on a task or a project, and I become a very direct communicator, not a mean communicator, but direct. Here's the facts, here's the information, boom, boom, boom. And And sometimes people are like, well, that's so mean, or you don't care about me, or you didn't ask me how I felt about it. Well, in my mind, it's direct communication. It's direct, it's to the point, and we're getting things done. And, and to have someone say, oh, and these are like old examples, oh, yeah, Black women, right? They're just so mean. You haven't seen mean. I do know how to be mean. That wasn't mean. That was just direct and to the point. Here's the information. But in the recent example, that wasn't the case. But it's the idea that, oh, we make up stories, but don't let the story automatically revert to race. And the same thing would be true if it were gender, or if it were sexual orientation, or right, any of the differences that are significant in our lives. Making up the story that a specific aspect of diversity is the cause of the problem. Like, let's stop doing that. Example number 3. Example number 3 has come up so often in the last 8 years in not only my primary spiritual community, but in hundreds of others. I have been asked this question or presented with scenarios related to this challenge I'm getting ready to share with you by dozens of ministers who have been like, Tracy, what do I do? Or how do I handle this? And the challenge is this one, and it's especially pertinent right now because in the United States, we are in an election, a national presidential election cycle, and we are deep in that cycle. But this has come up, consistently over the last 8+ years. And when there's an election coming up, state or federal, it comes up again. And that is the assumption that everyone in a New Thought spiritual community is a Democrat, or is Democratic, or is a member of the Democratic Party. How does this show up? It shows up in conversations where people assume the candidate they plan to vote for is really the obvious and only choice. Like, anybody who is not going to vote for that candidate is an idiot, is stupid, is dumb, is mean, is right. And just start the list. The name calling list begins. And it's really hurtful to assume that people believe the same thing you believe, and then to label anyone who doesn't believe what you believe or plan to vote for who you plan to vote for with a long list of negative and hurtful adjectives. Why does this come up in our spiritual communities? In New Thought spiritual communities, the idea that, oh, we are so loving and love is the one key. And okay, so if you think the Democratic candidate represents that or presents the potential for that to become the experience in the nation, great. But I believe that those congregants or those members of the community who identify as Republican believe that the candidate they are planning to vote for is going to provide guidance and leadership in order to create that same loving environment that we share as an ideal. And please don't forget that there are more than likely in every New Thought spiritual community a huge number of people who identify as neither Democrat nor Republican, but identify as independent. And they too are hearing you as excluding them or judging them because they are not believing the same thing you are believing or voting for the same person you are voting for. I am not someone who believes you should never talk about politics at church or with your colleagues at church. I think that that is as natural a conversation as anything else. Earlier today, I was on the phone with someone who mentioned gas prices as they were passing a gas station. It's just an everyday conversation, like we're paying attention to gas prices. And I said, oh, that's a really good price. I need to go buy some gas today. Thank you. Right. And they weren't telling me because they were suggesting I go buy gas or I go to that station to buy gas. It was just conversation. And our sharing, oh, I watched the Republican National Convention and I was really impressed by the talk that was given by this person, is just an everyday conversation. I watched the roll call at the Democratic National Convention, and I was really excited about the music chosen for my state. That can be a part of everyday conversation. We must be careful about our assumptions and the way that we express our preferences as if that must be the preference or the logical conclusion that everyone else in my spiritual community has come to. Remember, oneness does not require sameness. Our work and our commitment to be inclusive is about being able to see and engage with all the different ways that spirit shows up in the world. Does that mean that we like everyone or that we put ourselves in a position to be mentally, emotionally, or physically abused by others because we have to prove our love? No, that would be spiritual bypass. That could be actually dangerous. But in our everyday conversations with others and about others, we are the ones who are committed to being open to the fact that everyone doesn't think the way we do, behave the way we do, or I'll say it for myself. Everyone doesn't think the way I do. Everyone doesn't behave the way I do. Everyone doesn't believe exactly the same thing I do. And I'm not better than anyone else. So they are entitled to have their own experience. So those are 3 examples of things that have been coming up recently related to what does it really mean to be inclusive in our spiritual communities. It's a good theory. And it's great to say, oh, I believe in oneness and I love everyone. But if I turn around and I make fun of Gus Waltz, then I must not love everyone. If I say that oneness is not sameness and unity does not require uniformity, and I am going to be the example of love in the world, then I'm not going to assume that everyone is just like me. So when I observe behavior that doesn't align with the way I would behave, or when I feel hurt by something that someone does or confused, that's an opportunity to engage in a conversation and ask questions. Oh, well, why did you do that? Or can I just share some feedback with you about what was happening in me when you did this thing? Not because I want to make you wrong, but because I'm just curious, like, what was your intention? Even though the impact on me was hurtful or confusing or created chaos on our team as we were planning this event, right? So we've got to be able and willing to own our own stuff. And we also have to work. The work is developing the skill to have the conversations that may not be comfortable, but that actually educate and expand all of us. So those are just some open topics that have come up recently. I hope it's helpful for you to think about, wow, in my life, where have I been living spiritual principle and where have I been talking spiritual principle, but not actually living it? Finally, what I want to just drop into your thought process is this. We're all perfectly made, perfectly and wonderfully made. And our lives are a combination of our divinity and our humanity. So don't beat yourself up too badly when your humanity seems to override your divinity and you catch yourself making a judgment about someone or making a mean comment about someone. I'm not talking about simply making an observation of someone and a challenge they're facing. I'm talking about when you are turning it into a joke or turning it into judgmental language, and you're not willing to talk to that person because really, if they were in the room, you wouldn't say it, right? And so when we find ourselves doing that, our work is to train ourselves to notice when we slip into what has been very accepted human behavior for a very long time. And when we catch ourselves, then the job is to remember that we actually have skills and standards that we've committed to as a stained glass spirit leader. And it's up to each one of us then to turn it around and go, there, I did it again. My subconscious and my brain immediately went to, oh, this person doesn't like me because I'm a baby boomer and they're Gen Z, right? So they just don't like me because of, the age, the generational difference. Like, no, they may like you and just aren't showing it in the way that you are looking for, or they may not like you. We're not going to like everybody, but they may not like you because of what you talk about, what you wear, how you treated them, what you said to them, that you treated them like, instead of being almost 30 years old, they perceive and are experiencing you treating them because you think they're just like your grandchild. And you're coming across in a parental way when they are grown. They are grown. They may have a child or a partner or a spouse, and you're treating them like they're your teenage, grandson or great grandson. So there could be a reason there that has nothing to do with the general category that you're assuming. But if we don't have those conversations, we'll never know. So my encouragement for you this week is to pay attention. Listen to what you say about people who are different from you. Pay attention to what you think about people who are different from you, especially in your spiritual community, and begin to prepare yourself to engage in conversation to get to the real reason underneath or behind discomfort or miscommunication. And train yourself to step into a bigger view and a larger heart as you interact with people. My name is Tracy Brown. This is the Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And I really, really hope that you will join me again on a future Tuesday. Until then, take care, be inclusive, and be an example of love in the world.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.